Ladies and gents, welcome back to our Engineers podcast. Today I'm joined by Karim, who is one of the data and director of engineering at Blackbird. Blackbird are doing some pretty awesome stuff, which we're going to dive deeper into. Essentially, the business is protecting organizations around narrative attacks. And I think AI in this space, we're going to be talking about the threat of AI generally, but what these guys and girls are building around misinformation, disinformation, and how this is a really new sector is super interesting. So stay tuned for the next period of time. We're going to be uncovering what the guys and girls have built, how they've built it, some of the folks that they're working with to stop some of these threats, and a whole load more. Karim, thanks for coming to join us.
Thank you for having me, Elliot.
Absolute pleasure. Karim, before we get your version of Blackbird, which is going to be a lot more in depth and comprehensive, it'd be really good to touch on your background and we can understand a little bit more about who Karim is.
Yes, certainly. I do hear a lot that do have an interesting story, so I'm very happy to share that. Originally, I came from Morocco actually, and I was passionate about computers very early, since teenage. So I could actually, when I could get my hands on scraps, actually I assembled computers very early in my age. Um, and then I got paid for a grant to leave from Morocco to France to study in one very good university. So it's one of the computer science engineering schools. And the most interesting and extreme experience was to build a C compiler in ADA 95 in 2 months. And that was so hard that I said to myself, maybe I want to do business more than computer science. So I always had that um, mixture of both. And interesting enough, my first career was as a trader on Wall Street back in 2008. So I came into Wall Street really at the worst time. And I was tasked to actually manage a really big, complex portfolio at that time. Funny enough, I did still code and implement, so software was always part of my journey. And I spent 10 years in multiple banks, multiple regions across the world, a little bit in London, a little bit in Paris, a little bit in Sao Paulo, and then landed in New York. Um, And when I was in New York, I was still building businesses and software. Usually, those things they go hand in hand. And I decided to leave Wall Street because I just had enough of that. That was my 10-year mark. And I started working with different startups, very early stage startups, um, doing a lot of MVPs from concept to business. Funny enough, it's a really good way to experience failure and success and understand what leads to both. And then I have started with Blackbird. That was 3 years ago. And at that stage, it was very early stage. I think we were 5 people working on the project. Officially, I'm employee number 2. Um, and from there, I was very lucky and grateful to meet a highly talented group of people that were extremely passionate about solving that problem. And this is back to the early days of COVID, so 2020. So it was locked down, and obviously, disinformation was extreme and it was impacting our lives. Actually, we were in a disconnect between what reality is and what your screen is showing you. Um, and we worked very hard on that problem. So I took the responsibility of being the founding engineer, building the infrastructure, the data pipelines, and web application at that time, and working on the growth stage too in growing the team. making sure we have a good technical leadership. And yes, so it's still very hard and it's still very interesting problem. And I think we are probably the people that are more advanced in knowing this problem well.
Yeah. Misinformation, disinformation, the COVID days, it was insane for that. Social media was, through the roof. You could go from source to source. And I think generally, you can go from source to source and get a very different story or reality depending on how you shape it, um, to anything right now. I'm really interested in the problem that you're solving at Blackbird, but also what you've built at Blackbird to really solve this problem. So it'd be good to uncover both of those.
Yes, you touched on a very interesting aspect to the problem here, which is it's very hard. There is not an absolute truth. People would have their own vision, their own opinions. So one early challenge that we had, and that was the first question, that was like how we can build something that objectively brings value to solve that problem. And the answer there was, so there was a framework. So we built a framework, which is the five signal frameworks. Um, but the idea is to quantify the problem, is to understand how it propagates, how it grew, and where it came from. And what we built at the end was around some key elements. So the first element that is important in understanding any situation that comes from misinformation is narratives. So what is a narrative? We tend to say a narrative is a story or some announcement, right? So a narrative can take different shapes. So we worked really hard on building a system that can listen to multiple data sources and surface those narratives. So the number of narratives that we see, especially that now we scale the system, is fairly large. So it's not just about finding those narratives that are out there and they're spreading. It's about finding how they're relevant to you, how they're harmful to you, um, which ones are relevant to a special situation you are interested in. And we build the product in a way to actually make the user make those choices. And it was very challenging because uh, the key innovation that we had is, if you take any classic AI startup, right, they will just, for example, have labels on their classifiers and say, okay, this is uh, positive sentiment or negative sentiment. And the market is very flooded with this type of solutions where we look at it from a static world. But for us, that approach would never work because, as you said, everyone has their angle. You can take a customer like Coca-Cola, they're interested in a different thing than what Pepsi is going to be interested in, right? So how we can do something that brings value to those both sides. And um, we had a system that is adaptive, meaning that actually the user brings in active feedback that helps filtering and tweaking the output of what this risk of that narrative is to the customer. And that was a quite novel approach. Um, and further down the road, we had generative AI that came, right? And it was like a really big problem solver for us, because one, we know that the problem is multidimensional. We know it's not just about having people saying, "Oh, we like this" or "We don't like this." It's the problem has more depth, and we always wanted to bring all the resolution we can to it. So very early on, we were adopters of that. And at this point in the company, we are solving some very novel and interesting problems. So one of them is how can you create an information funnel that takes in big data. Here we are talking uh, internet scale type of data, um, and you need to use LLMs at certain stage. So if you do that too early, your cost will be enormous. But if you do that too late, if you use LLMs too late in your information funnel, you might not see all the details that you want. And our initial product, actually, one thing that we were really proud of is that you can get the top stories, right? And you can know what type of people are spreading them, what type of platform they emerged from. For example, you can say, oh, this is a narrative attack that starts from these 5 types of users, and they spread it from Telegram to Twitter, and then it exploded in Reddit and then came back to Twitter. But also, you can find at each stage of that evolution of that story what type of people did what and what other things. So we do have a very interesting feature called network analysis that enables you to see how in that really global social network that is built with users, content, images, videos, different type of things that people can spread. So it's really people and content, how they're meshed together, and you can see how things propagate there, like this specific story, or well, crypto fans, how they're doing, and things like that. It's a very interesting and fun product to use and to build too.
Yeah, I think as you're speaking, the amount of layered complexity that actually goes into the platform, I probably can't fully comprehend, not being in the business myself. But when we are talking about global internet scale and just how many sources of misinformation there are and can be, yeah, it's pretty difficult to understand. I think the thing that I've really started to understand is you're you're going directly to the source of the information and have built the right technology to understand where this information is being spread to and how it's being spread to and to what capacity. And I think that is some technology in itself. So I think kudos to you guys. Being engineer number two, I'd love to learn a little bit about the evolution of that technology journey over the last few years, because no doubt you've probably had to shift, shape, and pivot along the way.
Yes, definitely. Definitely is a very it's a the path is not straight to get to what you need. Um, so, few things we did very early that helped a lot. So, one, having a really strong tech debt process. So, we decided to say the 80-20 rule: 80% to new features, 20% to tech debt. However, sometimes it flipped, right? So sometimes 80% to tech debt. Uh, but the part with tech debt that really was helpful is to make sure that we are all the time aware of it. It's really an awareness problem, uh, because the danger with tech debt is that if it accumulates to a level where it makes it hard for you to build more or to revert course, you tend to lose time. So that is one optimization we did. Uh, Second part
Good
is,
lesson. That's a great lesson, by the way, in building a startup. Um, yeah,
yes, yes, thank you for that. Definitely, that was the right thing. Second big thing is never be afraid to challenge the status quo, meaning that we built a big data system initially that was going to handle streaming. That was like the first 6 months. But we find no, it's actually we need to do batch. And should we just take what we have and increment it, or should we do something better with the system that is better adapted for that kind of scenario? Uh, Recently, as the team is scaling and we're having more people, so initially we build the team in a way where we want to have really few people that are highly capable, and the core of engineers in the team is really amazing, actually, to see some engineers that came from being really, junior in the beginning, and how good they are right now because they worked on such a hard problem, very hard, that really big companies sometimes they come in and they give them those really nice offers and they turn them down. And I'm just like, wow. um, and to have that kind of commitment, and and really high performing engineering team, it's really two ingredients that are working for us here. Is one is the mission of the company, because it's highly mission driven, right? People wake up and you see the news and say, oh my god, I got to work. Right? Not in any startup you get the chance to think that way when you wake up in the morning. um, and and also another aspect that helped us beyond the fact to be bold enough to actually challenge the status quo and and switch, just having a consensus driven problem solving too, where pretty much we kept a flat structure and we said, okay, this is the problem, let's solve it together. It's not, and then we find out that, oh, a problem is actually 10 problems under it, and then we divide and conquer that way. Those are the main lessons learned, I would say, in this journey.
I think speaking to you initially, and you have been involved in the business from seed rounds through different series rounds, your Series B now. I remember you saying, philosophy, people, team, these are all really important things, and they're probably the makeup and the DNA of such a small, cohesive team in a mission driven company. You don't need to go through hyper growth, or I don't know at this moment, but you don't need to go and do it if it's unnecessary. That's what I really attach to why I probably think you've gone on to be really successful. Um, I don't think we've given enough credit to who uses Blackbird, by the way. Shall I let you take the mantle and share with us just some of the businesses that you can share, by the way, or some of the scale of businesses that you're actually building Blackbird for?
Yes, I can comment to that. Pretty much the part that is really interesting and motivating for us is the fact that we, since day one, we had really high profile customers, type of customers that you really want to ship in a very reliable enterprise level way. Um, for example, I can talk a little bit about NATO, and we engaged with NATO when the war started, and we were on the forefront on that since day one. So at the end, when we fine tuned our system and we had like all the elements and the intel that was flowing, we were far ahead than anyone else because we started working on it ahead of anyone else. But we had a compounding factor that worked for us. It's just that we learned how to take one module and build on top of the other So it's always a ladder. You never like build something from scratch. You take and things that fail sometimes can be reused for something else. That reusability was a really key for us. Um, Other type of customers, very early adopter of Blackbird's actually public relations. So we had the chance to work on one of the top public relations companies, and it's really interesting how we impacted their business in a way, because you clearly can see. I don't like the word disruption. I would say augmentation. I like the word augmentation, because what we did is that in the old days, public relations, you bring an expert and he's going to do a slide and just talk as being the expert. That still works. But the key difference that we brought is actually a data driven approach to the public relation one. Um, Especially around crisis communication. So, for example, if there is like a big crisis in terms of PR in a big company, so we do bring clear numbers and clear quantification of what is the risk and what is the impact. And that makes for our customers their messaging very easy, because people trust more data than than just words, right? That's another really interesting aspect. Um, we do have also other type of customers at the early stage on finance. So again, the big picture here is to realize how many different verticals very early on we engaged on and we successfully consolidated as customers. And this is because the problem is so general and there isn't an answer on it. So it's a really a green field and a new sector, really. And I think from the World Economic Forum risk classification, I think disinformation was risk number one. There is a new business category that is being created. So um, the commercial side is very interesting but challenging because it's also something new.
Yeah, I can imagine. And just touching on that commercial side, NATO, that's an incredible achievement. A business like that, I'd be really curious. Like, who finds who? Do you find them? Do they find you? Is it a referral or recommendation scheme?
Um, Unfortunately, I would not like comment on that because I would never take the credit for the hard people, the hardworking people who got us there. I On my side, I took care of building it, making sure it works, and making sure it scales. Um, but I can give some highlights there. Um, it's there is the there was a an industry that is not very apparent. There is like the intelligence business, right? So the intelligence business is not just few government companies that do that. It's actually a really big private market. um, and in that community, actually, when you bring in value or when you bring in insights, things get seen very quickly. So, because we were able to surface those stories and really in depth analysis on them with a very objective fashion, it just the word spread. Um,
Makes total sense. I think it would be great to understand more about some really interesting engineering challenges when we actually break it down and you're engineering something for global internet scale that's multifaceted. It's super interesting. I think it'd be good to understand top three engineering challenges and what's really difficult building Blackbird. And also secondary to that, like as I'm thinking and talking about this, thinking about how you prioritize some of your problems in terms of what do you build first, and why do you build it? What's that case behind it across some of your engineering efforts?
Yes. So the top three challenges, I would say, the first one is really how you acquire the data and integrate with so different partners. Because the reality is that there isn't one single. We're not just for example, a lot of startups are just Twitter house. We're way more than that. Um, and how can you lower the cost of integrating two different data sources and take all that data, normalize it really well, and bring in a reliable fashion all the analytics that we put on top. Um, the, this was a key challenge, and the optimization we have done on that was to really steer the system to be an open system on the data acquisition side, meaning that you create more a standard and then you rely on internal and external partners to build those integrations. So having an open system architecture on the front helps a lot because you can lower that cost. Relative to the volume of data, um, the challenge was more on the early days because, again, for the scale of the data and the size, um, you cannot invest in a lot of resources early on. So you have to be very scrappy. And thank God there were a lot of frameworks there that actually enable you to do that and have that self-hosted. But we went through many iterations. We went with the classic Kafka streaming. We went with your classic Argo orchestration. We had an iteration with Airflow, which is just standard in the thing. So, and then we evolved to something even better. And one challenge that we had there was as we were growing, we needed to start optimizing parts of the system and changing the hardware in some key processing areas. And at the end, we had something that actually, because you cannot just say at each liquidity round, you're going to scrap what you have and you have money now, you can build something else. It doesn't work that way. You always have to continuously transition, and it's like steering a ship. You cannot just go 180 degrees. You just have to do slowly that and optimize that path. So um, that was another challenge that we had. Um, and the third one was really actually a human challenge where actually you need to onboard a lot of engineers and keep on building the system and minimize the overhead and just working on the processes to do that. And the key word there is make it easy for everyone, for yourself, but for everyone. And that's the spirit of the team, really. So I hope I answered the first part of the question. Now the second part.
Really trying to understand the prioritization of the problems that you're solving.
Mhm.
Like, how do you prioritize those in your teams?
Yes. It's a really good question. So relative to that, in very early on from the seed stage to, I would say, Series A, it's a really different perspective to do that after you grow post Series B and you have a decent team size. So I will talk about the early stage and the later stage and some differences there. On the early stage, the team is really small and the communication is really flawless through every side of the company. So what generally tends to happen is that it's so easy to find a consensus of on what is the priority because you can just put the right people in the same room and then you do that. And the general framework that we had is to just decide high value, low cost. Always go for that low hanging fruit all the time. But there is a fallacy a little bit in optimizing that. That is a very general pattern. But as you grow, you start to notice that sometimes you have to be more strategic than tactical. And it's not just about the low hanging fruit, it's about, even if that is a little bit hard and it's not bringing you value right now, but in 1 year, if you follow that path, you have a system that scales better, that has lower friction with the user, or things like that. So as we evolve to the later stages, we had to do that balance. And it's not just about the low hanging fruits, it's about saying that, hey, we know it's easy to do it that way, but if we do it this way instead, we will be on a system where the cost of building a new connection with a data source is just way less than before, right? So there is a natural shift that happens as you grow.
I love that explanation. I think that that's so true for technology business, but I think that's so true generally for a lot of things. Problem solving, you can apply that to life as well. By the way, it's really easy to do the easy things day in day out, but to really move the needle, you need to start looking at some of the hard problems that you're going to be able to leverage that value in maybe a year, 2 years time. So it's actually quite nice to see like that transition in mindset that you've got as the business has been building, growing. You've gone through different stages of growth and how you've had to change and adapt. So good for you.
Yes, and the a lot of people do make that analogy. It's really like a child growing uh, startup. It's very much like that. So that growth pattern and that common wisdom in the startup grows too. So
What kind of trajectory are you on at Blackbird? As in, what do the next 12 months look like for what you can share with us?
yes, so it's actually very exciting. We so there are usually the growth pattern of a startup is that you have the early stage where you're fine tuning the product's market fit. You have the growth stage, obviously, where you just scaling your system. And then in most startups, you do have that stagnation where you just make sure things run, no need to reinvent the wheel, and the business is established, just scale. We are doing that. But beyond that, because there is a generative AI revolution, and our problem just got harder, right? Because people can spread information, disinformation from deepfakes is so easy right now, much easier to do than before. So we had to innovate. Also, one thing is that um, at stage B is that's when we shifted gears, and now we are multi-product company at this stage. And Compass, for example, is a really interesting product uh, that very mission aligned. And I don't know if people will be familiar with it enough at this stage, because still, like, we launched the product just 6 months ago. But this is a tool for anyone to go and check a claim or check a tweet or check any mention, uh, check the context around it relative to reliable source of information. And actually, funny enough, the internal joke at Blackbird is that we compare Google search and Compass. And it's just so surprising to see that actually making a search fact driven against reliable source of information brings so much value just around Googling. Actually, I stopped Googling and I'm just using it right now. And I'm so excited to see so different use cases. So this is the exciting part. We are really big adopters of the generative AI revolution, and we are highly innovative and questioning the status quo again.
I love how you're almost like fighting innovation with innovation almost, um, which I love. AI just accelerated your problem even further. But if you can use it to your advantage as well, then so be it.
Yes, definitely. It feels like that constant battle where you have like the two edges of the sword, and like um, and I do think that will last for a long time, and that is really the part that is exciting about this journey. Is the innovation that appears on the bad side, and how we can actually leverage the same thing on the good side too. So
Yeah. Um, it'd be good to touch on where the business might grow this year in terms of growth for you internally, expanding, whether that is more people in engineering, product, data, or other business units. Thousands of people follow the podcast, listen, tune in. There's no doubt going to be people who are very, very interested in what you're building, that will be interacting with what you're building, protected with what you're building. So it'd be really good to understand what people can see from Blackbird in terms of how you're going to be growing this year and in what areas, if so.
So the areas we'll be growing is actually running multiple products. So now we're really at a stage where we are growing in terms of more backend integrations with different customers. For example, products like Compass in a such a critical year like this one, where we have so many elections, the U.S. elections, and the high stakes, was really the right timing to launch a product like that. And the demand is increasing a lot in a way where people want to get closer to the source of the analytics. That means that they want API integrations, things like that, because we do have so many different use cases. It could be fact checking, it could be moderation, it could be things like that. People just want to take the signals, the information, the analytics, and use them their own way. So that is really a high expected growth area for us, and definitely it's an area where we would need more resources. Um, Relative to people, one approach that we have right now is that, and it's really a lesson learned from the past, is to always keep an eye on the hiring side. So like that, you can take time to really find the best talent out there. Because if you get a budget and say, "Oh, I need to hire 5 engineers right now," and then you do it as fast as you can, you don't end up with the best quality. But if you take your time over to build this relationship with people, um, and since the early days, always worked for us to work with people externally in the beginning, and then these people just naturally gravitate to become like blackbirds. We do have a very strong culture, and we have very fun people to be around. I would say it's really fun place to be. So
Good. No one talks about that enough, by the way. Um, as someone who's in the hiring space, and I see a lot of different methods, practices, styles, having that always on mindset to this person could be great for our business is such a powerful place to be, even if the timing's not right for the business. But having an always on mindset, thinking about good talent and always creating a good experience, you will be able to create a pipeline of people who could be interested in your business for months and years to come, rather than exactly what you said, time boxing it between a certain 3 months. Um, you might and won't always get the best people.
Yes, definitely. And we strive to do that. Now, sometimes it really depends on the stage. You just gotta push the accelerator or go fast. But like having being as early prepared as possible really helps a lot. So definitely.
We've spoken a little bit about philosophy. My last question to you, I'd love to understand what you think are the top three things people in the software engineering space need in order to thrive in today's climate of engineering.
Yes. So it's a very interesting question, and I do think that a lot of people are asking themselves this question right now because the reality is that the world is changing for software engineering. Um, and to me, the first thing is making sure to understand well what you're doing. It sounds so obvious, but let me just give you an example, right? We're moving in a world where a lot of engineers will just prompt ChatGPT and copy paste code, right? Uh, and it will this will have a K-shaped kind of growth. So some people will just like copy paste all the time, don't use their brains. Some people will just dig in more. Oh, I discovered something new ChatGPT gave me. Let me dig in more and see how this thing works. And being part of that type of people will help you a lot in the future because at the end is really just I think all our engineers are the same. It's just they're really passionate about understanding how things function, and when they build them, they're just using that skill that they built by doing these discoveries. So this is really uh, key one. Uh, Point two is we used to talk, I think, during the growth stages of Facebook and those like, the big four and like the revolution of the word 10x engineer was invented at that time, right? So basically, just someone that is so talented that will uh, do what 10. Now with generative AI, um, it's gonna be more than that. Is going to be I don't know how many X's, but uh, definitely you would need less people to build larger software, right? So uh, that comes back to point one, meaning that you really need to know well how things work, not just stop at doing your task, tying things together, structuring a project. So um, that's the number two. Now the number three for me is try new things. Do not stay because the world is changing so fast. Now at this point, for example, we to build an AI product, you need to collect data, train on it, find your classifiers, hire data scientists. With generative AI, you can just do zero shot classification and you skip like the whole cycle and save yourself a lot of time and money, right? So a lot of things are changing now. Really, this is the right time to try new things because that's the only way you'll find how you can do those optimizations.
I I really agree. I think the curiosity, and this kind of ties into all three of your points really in different ways. And it goes back to your philosophy around lower hanging fruit and ease or difficult tasks. The easy thing to do is lose the curiosity right now with the ease of information and the access to it. You need to continue learning because the world's evolving at the fastest rate it's evolved at right now. And I think a lot of people miss out on why are things happening or why are we building something a certain way and understanding the different layers beneath it. So people lose that why. And when you lose that, it's very hard to trace back to like the root of how we solve this problem. So
Yes.
keep the curiosity.
Yes, definitely. That's what got us here at the first place, right?
Exactly. Exactly. You know how I feel about the business. I'm really excited to see where Blackbird are in 12, 24 months and some of the products and features that you're building at the moment. I want to say a massive thanks for coming to join us. What you guys have built is incredible. We're going to carry on following the journey, and a lot of the links and some of the discussion points that you've referenced are going to be in the description below for people to take a look at. And keep doing what you're doing, and thank you.
Thank you, Elliot. I really appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit of the knowledge, and I think what you have here is really interesting. I think it's a unique type of podcast. Um, Not that many venues they offer like builders, the real builders, the people are making it happen on the background, the opportunity to express all those keys. So I'm grateful for that, and actually I'm looking forward to the next hosts too. So
Yeah, good. Okay. Well, thank you. I think we've always been passionate about building an ecosystem of innovators, entrepreneurs, people who are using technology to make a difference. That's what I'm really passionate about. And creating a platform where people can share what they're doing is number one priority for us. And for people listening, I think they know that. And with this podcast, for people who are listening, likes, shares, subscribership, viewership, and all of that fun stuff is important to us. It keeps it going round. So a big thank you from us. And again, like I said, thank you so much, Karim, for coming to join us. And we'll be watching, and you'll be watching as well, by the sounds of it.
certainly, thank you.
Thanks, Karim.
Hey guys, thanks for watching this episode. Massively appreciate you listening and checking in with us. If you want to find out more about us and what we're doing, please check us out on social media. What we're trying to do at Engineers is build a community to drive knowledge sharing and experiences. On Twitter, we can be found Enginears.io. It's no underscore. We've also got a website which is Enginears.io. These links will all be posted in the description. Any feedback and comments are massively appreciated. We're always looking to improve on where we can. Thanks, guys.